Hey, yeah, so I'm so sorry. I was too busy eating moose meat. Oh, oh. But anyway, with the term, the old people, we have different ways of seeing the different terms that we know within our, no, like the word of epistemology would be almost like the different thing ways that we would one of the ways that we'd explain was tamawin. That'd be the one of the ways that we can, you know, in the ways of knowing, I guess that the absolutes, if we want, whatever, in their form. With us, we often go to the old people, the old timers. They all often go to our uh, Ansaya. The I guess it would be that our excerpts of our stories. So that's what that's what with Ansaya we would Tansaya focus our Tansaya whenever we answer certain things with Munyaok the case Ukan Mama that's the we Tansaya we have that way of Kistanoya pulling you would term excerpts I guess of the long story. Ketwewini take that's what we call an excerpt from our story. Ketwewini that's how Danseto Nikatik. That's that part of the story that says that within in specific on a specific topic of discussion. Nagsegwa, haya. So with us, we've been talking about that. Haya, I guess when we start within Kianoya, our epistemology is Kianoya, we have this ansaya, a way of how we kian within we have what we term in our culture kiano a spirit or spirituality. We can never. It's inseparable. Ukama kiano ansaya. Uh, Kiano kanma. We have that our meaning and maya dansaya. That the nature or origin and the limits of human knowledge. I guess we ought to do it that with as far as reason and is referred to Keanu. So it goes back that far again, or we utilize that the spiritual essence as part of Keanu, our epistemology. It's not only like in a scientific sense, purely science, Makaya. We have a component within that Keanu because uh, one of the reasons is because our spirituality is inseparable. In fact, there was a time when we raised our children. Back in the day, we raised our children in absolute tipahuan. They call it balance: physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional absolute balance. That was part of our Weikian Oya of how we, in a very our own, in that way. That's our own logic because we found that spiritual essence of it. We believe in such things that stemmed from that are things such as what we call miracles. The old people they have this thing that kianoia. We have such things as miracle. Okay, a miracle, something that happened in a miracle way. Nagsisigyan, So, in fact, very frequently with people that we knew, with holy men, holy people, sacred people, and that the essence of belief itself, uh, belief in a spirituality, uh, I guess with today, it's kind of more or less just only narrowed very thinly, only very narrowed down to a seeing is believing kind of terminologies that people have. Oh, seeing is believing. That's how far we go today. Whereas back in the date, we have stories back in if we go to Rocky Boy, Montana, I don't know if there. This was a couple years ago. There was only a handful of people that were left to see what their holy man can actually do back in that day in broad daylight. And it was in terms of health, healing people in broad daylight kind of thing. He wasn't a magician or anything like that to perform magical tricks and all that kind of thing. He was a person that, got people well in broad daylight in whatever condition they were. The only thing that he couldn't get uh, cure, they said, was if you lost a limb. Ipaskesona, they called them, your arm or you lost a leg. You can't put another or replace another one for you. But any other thing he would be able to cure right there and then. So that's the kind of when we say epistemology, when we incorporate the spiritual element in it, that's what we mean by that. So that kind of stuck with us as time went on because we hear so many stories of elders like that, and what miracles that they performed, in making sure that I guess the younger generations in the future also they try to ensure that at least their offspring or someone within close to their area, their reservation, or would have that type of knowledge and a belief of that kind of in that there was such an actual thing as that entrenched within our what they call that the learning or the balanced approach in raising children and how we did that in a simultaneously what we call um, a nurtured setting with the children. So that's part of our ways. Kaya we believe in things like that. Now, when we say spirituality, we have what we would term in that way. I guess like you could even want to call it partially science. I guess within that because it's very. I guess you could say it has a very balanced. Even that story within our long story, where the creator evolves, he creates himself. So we have that story there too, of how he creates himself and all of that kind of thing. That history of how he created everything, and how he you utilized whatever was, even in the area when we say cloud or mist. In its earliest form, that cloud had a certain kind of a movement within it, that mist, and the movement within that. There was a term that they use, oyipayo. Oyipayo means from that movement of that cloud formulated the mind. And it's through that mind, they say, I, there was a being that this mind created itself into a soul, but also a very vast mind. I, Ibiza, that Omantanescan, they say a very vast mind, and so vast that when the elders are talking, we'll hear them say there's a part when they'll be starting their prayer and they'll go, "Eh, mama tayo ng kakyogi kwa kaki hoye taman." That second part, kakyogi kwa kaki hoye taman. What that means is that had created everything using just your mind. That's what it means. But that's how vast it, he created his mind. He created everything, and all he used was just his mind. So that's one of the examples, I guess we could say, of that part of our being in that in I guess knowing epistemology in the manner that we do with the spirit. I guess very much a part of it. That's part of our very, I guess you could say, one of our systems, I guess, of how we utilized everything within the past. That inclusive everything was in absolute total balance. So with that, one of the other things that we talk about there is, the succession, I guess, of spiritual beings that are being created. Within that, we have what we would term as our own periodical chart of elements, based on the star blanket by our star blanket of our chief sky being, Okimauki Suko Iin, as they call him, who had, star chart, as we would call it. Atahkagok is what we would call it. There's a reservation in Saskatchewan called Atahkagok. And there's even a reservation in Saskatchewan that's called Star Blanket Reservation. So, so it's anyway, the star chart is what we talk about within that. And the only thing with the only basic difference within our periodical chart of elements is ours is our chart is bigger. It's a bigger chart. It's has way more the main within the standard, the one we have today in today's world of academia, and this the most modern and updated one. It's we have some 128 odd main elements, I guess, within that star chart. With us, we have a way more than that. Like ridiculous, in fact, ridiculously more than that, of separate entities that were created. As one elder once put it, one of my 123-year-old aunties who never used a cane, still part of that all athlete circular encampment type of society that she came from. One time she told me that within your lifetime, I prophesied to you, she said, that they will discover something in a solidified form. It'll be inside this Askugis, if they call this atmosphere. She called this atmosphere, and within that, they'll find out and they'll discover that this this thing that they're going to discover is that it's made out of matters. Never mind just matter, but matters that they've never even heard of or don't even know about. That's what one of her prophecies was, and it'd be in your lifetime, she said. And another thing is, they'll start finding new elements. Our old people, she called them, that's what they would term as, the elements, the tiniest. They're so tiny that you can't see them with your naked eye. That's what yeah, that's how they were addressed them as. And then she said they'll start finding new ones. Like that's another prophecy I'll make too within your lifetime. They'll start finding the new ones that are as part of our chart, our periodical chart. I guess you call it. She called it our Atakago, or star chart of elements. So that's what And lo and behold, not too long ago, a few years back, there was a scientist that I'm trying to think of that. Anyway, he discovered what he termed as the God particle. And this particle, he said that it's and here, oh, there's another thing that she prophesied to me. Well, she said she didn't really prophesize that. She said that these elements are they're really powerful. So she said that the creator can take this one little guy with one little element and and create so much power into this little deity that this deity can renovate the whole universe. That's what she said. Now, with that scientist discovering that particle, the God particle, he said that it's so powerful it can destroy the whole universe. So there's a difference between destroy, as told by the scientist, and renovate, as told by the old people, that this particle is so incredibly powerful that it can renovate the universe. That's how powerful the creator. So there's a difference between destroy and renovate. And our old people say the power that the Creator has that He can bestow upon this element is to be able to renovate the universe. So that's some of the teachings that she had. So lo and behold, one day I ran into it where they talked about for all of you Fox News fans, I don't mean to step on your toes, but I watch the American news too, but it's MSNBC, it's a political channel that I watch. And while I was watching it that one time a few years back, there popped in, I don't know, this, what do you call a newscast, something important that people had to find out. And they that time, the breaking news, they call it. And during that time, NASA, they talk about NASA and the science community cited an object that was inside of the atmosphere, and was going at such an incredible velocity that anything that state-of-the-art science had made and created would flare up within inside that atmosphere. It would just flare up. But this was made out of matters that didn't flare up. It was such an incredible velocity, and they couldn't believe how this thing hadn't flared up and was just moving like super fast. So that's one of that's the thing that she prophesied to me 50 years ago, and at the time I never knew in what form or what way or what that was going to be, and here I find out that this thing was in full movement, and they found out that it was something they don't know. It was made of things that they don't even know. Modern science doesn't even know about. So that's the some of the things that we, as far as our people, um, is have that's the stories behind these type this type of matter that old people talk about within our star chart, for example. There's many other stories that I guess it must have took a lot of incredible, enormous amount of sophistication and brain power and technology and even just within a society itself, to be able to maintain paradise, because one of our within our old people, the way they talk about, especially this last major era of after the Great Ice Age, the old people they talk about. the stories of how we lived and how we believed in things and the societies that had started at that time. These different speaking groups that started within the entire hemisphere. The island of Ministic is what we call the island. It's a little different from Ojibwe. Ojibwe call it the island, which is predominantly just North America. But with us, Ministic is North Central and South America. Ministic that that the part that separates North and South America, there's a little narrow part that separates that becomes narrow. In fact, that's the word we have for it. Ministic means the part where the island narrows is what it means. Ministic is the entire island, and Tawitik is the where the island narrows. So that's part of our, I guess, language and how we. The other thing too, the epistemology is also within the language that we use, And so this statesman at the time, our person, our circle encampment chief, when these different nations formed, tribes, I guess, throughout the island, North Central and South America, of North Central and South America, we had a treaty prior to contact, and our treaty based on this statesman's, our Central Circle encampment leader, our statesman, based on his accounts, oral traditional accounts, he knows that we had a treaty prior to contact, and that but our treaty was based on one single principle, and the principle was the Creator made everything perfect. Let's leave it as is, and we've seen it for ourselves as a very, I guess, um, experts in the nomadic lifestyle of how we were specialists within the nomadic lifestyle that we were. We were able to see for ourselves of, that these people that we mingled with throughout the island, North Central and South America of this hemisphere, we mingled with those people and we found out that they were adhering to that treaty that we had of that one single principle. Everybody adhered to it, and we've seen it for ourselves when we traveled. They were eco specialists within their own sanctuaries that part of Mother Earth that they were custodians of, taking care of her, our mom in that way. So in that way, there are certain terminologies that we shared as indigenous people, or you want to say common denominator type of characteristical traits that we shared, and one of them was in saying when Mother Earth. Well, ours, when we say Mother Earth, that's our mom. She is a living being. She's a living supernatural being. Our mom, our mother, and I always say it's different from like how we sometimes see it in the commercials, where they say Mother Nature this and Mother Nature that, that kind of thing. With us, our mother is she is a living being. She's a living deity. And how the old people within our history of creation story, how they talk about her and how she was created and how she in turn created a thunder being to take her to you know, take her milk to you know, keep her milk moving. Tamawi na ya. Ito, Tosapo was how she instructed the thunder being. I want you to carry my milk for me. That's what she instructed him. So that was parts of the they're more vividly detailed when we're talking about the actual story in the form of a ritual. But it's just sometimes we do kind of surface type teachings in order to try to convey certain meanings across when we say the spirit or spirituality being integral to a part of who we are as a people. And if we've never compartmentalized it or tried to separate it all into one day, and the other 6 days where it's totally different again. That kind of we've never tried to do that. We've tried to always be inclusive of that belief system in every aspect of our society, being, especially back in the day, how we uh, were raised in that manner, got, as I cited earlier, and so that was part of who we were there. So, in saying that, that kind of thing, we believe that that's her, that's our mother in action, and even we have terminologies that cater to, I guess, or that made us understandable in the kind of people we were. Even with all these different, our statesmen got together with many of these different nations throughout, they were adhering to that treaty. And it's even in their language, embedded in their language. Of course, we had what we term as a sign language too, which is which was very universal throughout the entire island. And we had a sign language conference here. Saskatchewan had the Indigenous Sign Languages Conference here a few years back, about 5 years ago or so. And it said it was very successful in that. But the language, even within our language, embedded within our languages, how we took care of it, how we were adhering to that treaty too. The oneness with keep let's keep the earth as is, as per created by the creator. Like that, we have, I guess, even oral traditional proof of that. Like the common word an elder once told me was of planting or growing something is sticky wind. He used that when you plant or grow something, sticky wind, he said. But when you break that into its derivatives, biginihtaine, that's how you break that, you say that. Um, Tahkuhtuatig is from its word derived, where the word derives from is how what I just said. So you take this word and you break it down to its derivatives. Stikewin, planting or growing something. The first part of that word stikewin is stick. Uh, Stick in. That's that word. Stick in within stick in. It comes from the word stick in. Stick in is whether it's edible or medicinal, it grows indigenous to that vast area of land. That's incredibly vast area of land. That's what that is. That's what they talk about within stick in. And then a win, the last, somebody have their what you call, does somebody have their computer on unmute? Somebody.
Yeah, the person that has an iPhone, they're unmuted. Oh, they're mute.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Okay. Anyway, that's that word we say stige when it comes from that. It's whether that edible or medicinal, it stick it grows indigenous to that soil. And the last part of that is a win. A win means the maintenance of its indigenousness, that plant. That's what it means with that. With that when we say "uktua," which is your root words and derivatives, and the etymological, breakdown, I guess, of that word. It has a story within it. So that's the kind of language we use too when we say we adhere to that. It's part of it. It's embedded within our language, the different terminologies that we have in regards to that, of the oneness with our Mother Earth type lifestyle and its absolute practices that we maintained, for thousands of years until contact, of course. So that's our, and then the other thing too, we talk about this is how we were here with each other, like our statesman. He goes around and lives harmoniously and through what we would term today they call it barter and trade. It's we call it the sacred ceremonial of trade. In fact, it's so holy within our own culture, the Plains Cree. We have a sacred trade dance. It's a ceremonial ritual dance, trade dance. We call it that. It's a holy ceremony. So that's how much we revered the element of trade and trade practices throughout the entire island of North Central and South America. In that, well, being nomadic specialists that um, we were able to, every single journey we made. Now, I looked at the term nomadic when I was, teenage, way back in my teen years, in a dictionary, I looked it up, nomadic, the wanderers, kind of thing. We're far from being the wanderers because with us, nomadic means with us, they're what do you call, they're specialists within that field of knowledge. They're nomadic specialists of how they have a term and a chief, the central circle encampment chief or statesman. He had a separate term for every single journey that he was going to make. Say a camp of about 1,000 people, they would always live in a state of readiness. They got up in the morning, they fixed their bed, they got their bedding rolled and everything all tidy. Everything was always in order, so that when the camp crier calls, that that camp of the 1,000 people would be on the move in less than an hour, and they would not leave. They wouldn't have garbage and everything laying all over the place, so they would leave there with virtually very little to no imprint, of you know human footprint. They That's how incredibly well organized they were. So whenever they made a trip like that, it would be an individually named trip that they would make. One such trip would be the trip of medicine picking, and it was called Agene Skamwin. Agene Skamwin. And so agene, when you break that word into its derivatives, piginitaine, into its derivatives, the first part of the word agene means a meticulous count. Iskamek, the second part of that word is all of the different, it comes from Iskamgak, all of the different land terrains that exist. Iskamgak is in the entire landmass. So that's what it means. You know, Many different land terrains that exist within that. And when the last part is a very specifically spelled out pathway, taken into consideration such as polar ice caps at the time of journey throughout that area. But you know, all of that to make sure that Win is a very specifically spelled out pathway as to how they're going to uh, go and obtain every single medicine within the entire hemisphere and bring them all into under one roof called Miteogamik. Now I know with the Ojibways they have theirs is similar to ours. There is it I mean pronounced similar or it's kind of rhymes. Theirs is called Midewin, whereas ours we call it Miteogamik. That's what we call ours. So it's that's part of our in the maintenance, I guess you could say, of the self-checking, I mean, checking the self-checking systems of orality, oral tradition, utilizing many forms of checking systems, being the history of creation story being one. And even in that, that within itself is epistemologically, I guess you could say, the foundation of is based on that even in the very way of how we maintain that story itself from its very what you would term introversion. The introversion, uh the four versions of our long story, as we call it, our history of creation story. Now with that history of creation story, we come from the Plains Cree come from two very distinct societies, two separate distinct societies within the Plains Cree. One society, they call them Uitamagosuak society. That's one, so that's the belief of your dark lodges, your black lodges, not having the whippy ceremony, the shaking tents. The belief is they bring in the spirits to talk to them. That's the belief system that they have. Now, the other society is Ayan Scots Okinongo at Simone, what they're called. That means the intergenerational carriers of the long story society, and that's the story. That's the society that I've been born into. So between these two societies, this is the one I've been born into. So anything and everything, I guess you get within our history and the kind of things I talk on as far as our lectures come through our direct excerpts from that intergenerational carriers of the long story. Ayan Scots o pinunbuats muneo, as they call us, the intergenerational carriers of the long story society. So that's so it's within that you know belief system that we have uh, four major ways of how we can tell that story. One of the ways that we tell the story is, let's say again, a circle encampment of 1,000 people. Uh, we have within the four cardinal directions of that circular encampment, the east teepee, south teepee, west and northern teepee. Inside that encampment, the east teepee, that it's the intro version of that long story. It's that intro version takes 4 days and 4 nights, but done by several elders. And then the general version is the Southern Teepee, and that takes 16 days and 16 nights. Okay, so the intro version is Katsaatsepoatik. It's called a very highlighted version. The general version, 16 days, 16 night version, that Southern Teepee, is called you know Kayahuatik. So all of them have atik. Okay, and then the Western teepee is Katipuatik. Okay, that's your recited version, and that takes 64 days and 64 nights straight, done by several elders. They had a system. One of them is Mamis Imamis Tapistamatos, which means when one elder gets tired, there was always an elder there that would continue on from the tailored version that he left off. Let's say it's the tailored skeletal framework, 4 day, 4 night highlighted version. He would come in there and sit right there. And from where that elder left off in that highlighted version, he would continue on from where the other elder, and they have a word for that, ihan skiwatamoan. Just continue on as part of the prescribed highlighted 4 day, 4 night version kind of thing. So they had that type of a system. So that even within that itself, it's a very logical kind of a system, that they followed within the tradition of orality, I guess they call it. And then your second day, 16 day, 16 night version, same thing. And then so you had a word for that, yeah. Epistemata chick sitting for the next guy that got tired, and Ian Skiwatamata chick from where they left off in whichever version. Like say the third TP was Katipua Atik. Remember, all of them have Atik. Katipua Atik is the third TP, and the third TP is a very recited version of what the whole stuff. My dad used to call it the smooth story, the smooth story version, the smooth flowing story version. That's what he is. Kapamuate, he used to call that very smooth story version. Well, that's your 64 day, 64 night version, and that is called Katipuate, if you want recited version. And then your northern tipi is Kapaskituatik, the ceremonial version. There you have Atik again, as the end part of that. What it is a very fixed way of how it's done orally. It's Tuatik like that. So in its intro version, you know, Katsatsa Puatik, 44 night, and Kaya Puatik, 16 day, 16 night, Ate Puatik, 64 days, 64 night, and Paskip Tuatik, straight 4 month version. Whoa! You know, that's the Sasapuatsimok is what they would talk about. That means it's continuous, especially in the winter month, in a very ongoing cycle, 24-hour cycling day based on that. So that's what they call the Sasapuatsimok in that way. So that's how, and they had a word for that, the circular encampment too with these elders. Yeah, state. It means they go back and forth to wherever called upon, or well, wherever they think that they're going to be needed, that kind of thing. Yeah, state days. There were a lot of elders that time. One of the reasons for that I find is they were made to feel important. So they're integral part of that society. Fix what they call the same wavelength within the absolute oneness with the earth ways and principles of that type of livelihood and living, that kind of thing. So that was how they maintained it, was through the stories mixed with all of the different things that are associated with. It's a very all encompassed. It encompassed everything within their society, and it's a very descriptive. Our language. Why it was that oral traditional uh, uh, model was very successful is because it had a very descriptive language. My grandpa used to say, "I don't think there's anything in the world that you can have in today's technology and everything that we don't have a word for, we don't have a name for. We have a name either through the way it looks, its functionality, or both." That's what that's what my grandpa, 105-year-old grandpa, told me. He say with his name, Francis Quinn. And these are the mentors that I had within. Some of them I named here. Mentors from that oral traditional and circle encampment society. So that's part of our, if you can say, a very affixed epistemology, if you want that. We had a very affixed way of how we made sure that that happened. That was just a very successful manner of, maintaining your society, a very stable society at that. We had, but I guess within just that story itself, it brought us to the same wavelength. As my dad said, as late as I guess, let's say a couple hundred years ago, every single man, woman, and child within that circle encampment knew the general version. That was the 16-day, 16-night version. And then from there, it was that recited and the ceremonial versions that, for other elders, like for example, by the time you finish learning the 64-day, 64-night version, your hair should be the color of mine. Sorry, but it took that actually it takes a lifetime to master the entire story word for word. Istipuatsikanowick. That's the word that in its word for word version. And then so by the time you're in the northern TP, which is your 4-day, 4-night I mean your 4 month version, the northern TP, your hair should be pure white, like the snow up north, that kind of thing. So when they said kaya state, it's like going back and forth. They were, athletes, natural born athletes. They were all, in fact, the ones that the couple of people that I knew that came back that uh, hailed from that era of course, they were adolescents the time that circular encampment ceased to exist. But I knew a couple of people that had vivid accounts of that, and those two people, like 121-year-old Okimau Stick Plains Cree, uh, he they said that all the way through, he never used a cane. I've never seen him with a cane at 121. And they announced their death, and they didn't die of sickness. And us younger generation, we call it death ceremony. Them, they called it traveling ceremony. And then the old lady that was 2 years older than him, she was 123 when she passed. No cane. So that's the kind of society they hailed from. And so when you say state, they walk back and forth. Of course, they had these, you know, asama, which was these asama with were snowshoes, and they had a very uh, specific way of how they made things like that within because they had that nomadic lifestyle, very specified way of how they made everything. So that comes from that very descriptive language that I was telling you about. Everything it's done in its very vividly accounted descriptive sense of how you passed on that knowledge and that information. And it's no wonder that's one of the would be the elements of orality. If you want oral tradition, many elements within that. One of the things in stating the term epistemology, one of them is within what we say, or the systems, the many entrenched systems of orality. One of them would be the passing on of information from heart to heart to heart to heart. My mom and dad must have loved me so much to equip me with a prerequisite of that, a long story, and that was the language. I never talked until 7 or 8 years old when I entered school. I never really talked English, even though we lived close to the store. I'd say 5 cents, the 10 cent. I knew how quarter, like I knew how to say. I said hello and different things like that. Very minimized English. We lived close to the store, but it was everyday usage of, even with my friends, everyday usage of just plain old Cree. And so that's what they equipped me with was my parents. So that was part of that, the heart to heart to heart. Of course, the other thing is my dad, he equipped me with, I was a slow learner, of course, but he equipped me with that intro version of that long story, and it was a 4-day, 4-night in duration of, to of course one person can't do it straight through. It's several elements, but to the amount of 4 day, 4 nights, he equipped me with that. So I was a slow learner. So I didn't catch that 4 day, 4 night version until I was 8 years old, believe it or not. So that's how slow I was in memorizing that full 4 day, 4 night version. But ironically, uh, by the time I was 16 years old, because of that motivation, I guess that I received from my father, by the time I was 16 years old, I'd finished learning the 16 day, 16 night version. Part of which, back in the day, we had all kinds of real fancy terms when we appreciated each other as within our peers. They'd say English words, they use cool, that kind of thing. So we were, encouraging each other in that way of how much we actually part of our culture that we knew. So, but my dad, by the time I just received the 16 day, 16 night version, he had a common saying at that time, and his saying was, "Kime staatsimone," and what that means is, you've done made me run out of story. That's in the 16 day. That's all he up to the 16 day, 16 night version was all that he knew. So, but at the same time, he was equipping me when I say that, he got me ready by the very fact of what you would term as exposure. The exposure of that, and we didn't, of course, there was no circular encampment model, which we can always totally fall back on. Speaking of the epistemology and how incredibly, you know, uh, how they were as far as the same wavelength is concerned with it in the entire camp, But with this, where he was using the same principles within the circular encampment, but he was uh, incorporating all of these different, these other, these two lodges, the 6 4 day, 6 4 night lodge, and the 4 month lodge, by very simply giving me exposure. And in what way did he do that? He was how would I state it today? A traditional hairdresser. Oh yeah, but it was he'd give haircuts throughout the ceremonial season. He would Elders would come in for different types of ceremonies, and we would cut them. And all of these different names that he had for the different styles of haircuts that he would give. And he would always have soup, the different throughout the season, again, the seasonal types of soups that he would make, and that was free. They'd come in, and it was a visit, and they would eat. He would feed them. After he feeds them, he takes them off in the corner over here someplace, where he very, meticulously kept clean, and we kept it clean for him. We helped him, and he would put on their a sheet, and then he would button it for him, and then of course there he would start his haircut, cutting different styles and braiding certain different styles of hairdo. But what that was exposure. So anytime I wasn't playing around outside as a little boy, you would say, "Well, ito, skis, no siyape." We would, you would ask me to come in within their circle. Sometimes they would have a pipe ceremony, and I would sit in on those. And of course, I was very well trained in that pipe ceremony. The kind of behavioral mannerisms you'd have to have in that in this being there as a little boy, certain age range, and the things you do with the pipe and that kind of thing. So I got really I guess you could say very familiarized in that type of a setting. But at the same time, what was happening to me was I was listening to their prayer. And not only that, but I was listening to parts of that. And that's the ceremonial version that they're talking about. And even the very specific, the specifically detailed, recited story form type version. So at certain times, I was getting excerpts of the story during that time, as I was learning these other two versions. I was growing up as a kid. So after a while, especially during the, around mid-teens, I was able to differentiate which version the elder was coming from, whether he's coming from the intro version of the story, a general version of the story, or is he coming from the recited, plain old, straight flow, smooth story kind of version, or the ceremonial version. How does that story, very detailed story, 64-day, 64 night version, move to the fourth TP to become, how do you set up ceremonial lodges within our society, all of the different ceremonial lodges and the ceremonial gestures that they do to, in prayer, in the ritual setting, that kind of thing. And how does that embody the long story of how you become ordained, I guess, as part of a very effective user of that, I guess, that part of, your, to be a ceremonial person that resides within that setting, as a person that takes care of, that part of the ritual process, ceremonial, and keeping in mind that it embodies with the long story of why lodges are set up in the manner that they are, in all these different gestures that they do within that, the ritual aspect of that, the uh, fourth TP creation story. It suddenly just comes together and starts making to make a lot of sense, even though I was getting parts of that already in my growing years, but I never realized that I was actually, I guess you could say, people were getting me ready that one day I could be able to hear things like that and to be able to, be exposed to that type of teaching. So that's epistemology within itself, a fixed way of how what you would say, a very constructive, orderly, normal way of how you would feed into your memory bank. A very smooth, very constructive way of how you feed into your memory bank, and it's effective. It becomes effective because you've done it in phases, and you have a better tendency of remembering. And of course, the other thing too is the actual story, utilizing the oral aspect of it. Not too long ago, there was I don't know how many years back now, there was some psychologist that it was quite controversial, but there were a group of psychologists that were saying that when you put a person in front of a great big theater, a big, huge screen with all the color and sound and everything done for you, and you're watching the screen, you see part of your brain remains stagnant. It's dead. It's not doing anything because this picture and color and everything within this big screen movie theater is doing it all for you. The sound and everything, it's doing it for you. So it remains stagnant, that part of your brain. But when you're Muslim or Bokum, your grandpa and grandma are talking and telling you a story, a very vivid account of, especially from our very descriptive language, and you're understanding this descriptive language, well, naturally, what's going to happen is you're going to form that part of your brain is going to become activated. That, what would have been, stagnant and, watching a theater, your Muscle and Kokom are talking, so you're formulating your own screen. You're formulating your own theater, your own very vivid picture of, through their descriptive language, of what it is that you're telling. So what's happening is that story is flowing through you, and chances are you to remember that story are greater than, say, the movie, version, which maybe sometimes you'll say within the movies themselves, you'll say, "Oh, I gotta go look at the third, that the third movie of vampires because I forgot what happened there. Yeah, kind of thing, it doesn't give you that the real memory bank that you created when you're Muslim. It's different when you're Muslim. People are talking because you have a total clear picture of what it is that they're saying within our descriptive language. So that's a part of that. The very common sense way or the down to earth level of how they pass on this information and knowledge. And this knowledge of this, it's why were they the same wavelength, all these TP circle encampment of athletes, they're all in the same wavelength. So when they traveled, they knew what to do exactly because they had what they call a well-rounded out educational approach. That means they hit all of the main parts of the daily living aspect of how you go about doing things in your everyday life within that circle encampment and your travels throughout the entire hemisphere. Because it's clearly spelled out within our long story. It gives all of those detailed accounts to as to how you so in that way you're all in the same wavelength within the whole entire encampment. And so it becomes a very well-rounded out educational approach but that's not to say they were specialists too within that circle encampment. Each one of those circle encampment people had a very specialized field of knowledge um, within their camp. And so over and above that, what I call that what we already titled that a well-rounded out educational approach, we had our specialization that we had our own unique specialization of say flint napping, for example. How do you flint nap rock? For example, an example of that is a part of flint napping could be some of the elders they said don't point cut your arrowheads for bigger animals. Don't do that. If you point cut it, if it lodges and sticks onto a rib, you'll tick off the animal, of course, and they'll come after you. But if you round cut it and sharpen it in all sides of that round cut, if Nancy's pihtuane nut, that's the Cree word that you use for the pihtuanenge and Nancy's pihtuane nut. So that's a very specialized field of even how you utilize a very descriptive language to maintain how those principles were done. So very curved type of sharp point like that, let's say if you hit a rib with that with your arrow, it would still continue traveling because it's rounded cut that. And even if it missed the heart, you would still rip through the lungs and what happens, the lungs collapse and that pumping sound like that, the lungs collapse, the animal drops and it's very humane. It's still a very humane death. Yeah. It's like, like if you hit the heart, it's just total instant death. But with the lungs collapse, it's still humane in that way too, So they had a very incredible science there. Even the scientists, and they didn't call it science, but a very specific way of how do we maintain the one with the earth systems using this well-rounded out educational approach, but our specialization to make it happen effectively. That's one of the ways so that arrow, making arrowheads would be one of the real specialized field of knowledge. And the other thing, of course, is there was a specialist in the, hunting techniques. How do um, let's say draw your bow. How do you draw your bow? How do you release your arrow? All of these different things is a science within itself. Uh, there was a string maker, Bimnahwani Gil, they call him, and that the arrowhead maker was called Ndagaskasni Gil. That's what he was called, and so there are very specific names to all of them. And Upimnahwani Gil is the string maker, and the string maker, he would have a very, a specified way of making it so that there's pretty much no stretch in the strings that he made. Absolutely. Ikaitanikipaigi. That's the word that means they can't have any stretch within them. So he had to fix those string in such a way so that they maintain the stability of that snap. It would be an elasticity type of a snap. It would be, a solid snap of a very well-made string, a very tightly well-made string to hit home your target. That kind of thing, very specialized fields of knowledge. So you had Opimnahwani, he was called that, making different out of different fibers, whether you're talking vegetable fibers or animal fibers, that kind of thing. So we had all of these specialist doctors, if you will, in their field of knowledge of how they maintained those one with you. It wasn't just a piece of string and a stick put together, and then you shoot that, and you're supposed to bring down the biggest buffalo of them all, a piece of string and a stick. This required an incredible amount of physics that would go into it. Even the snapping power, that trajectory of the arrow, different things like that. They were doing. People would have to have certain specializations within that. And even within that, I was telling you, is the teachers of that, to how to be able to hunt, horseback riding, hunting skills, or, just walking, hunting skills within that. You have certain fields of specialized knowledge that all of these would possess within that circular encampment, and they would be all collective. They call that collective is like working together to create the whole core group, and that's effectively together. That an example of the concept of collectivity, for example, the concept of collectivity was so vital within, especially when the depletion of the buffalo and Muniao started to, deplete the buffalo for us and stuff. So that became a buffalo hunt was so vital that the essence of collectivity was so important and vital that in the buffalo hunt that let's say if one guy boo-booed in that buffalo hunt, that might mean no food on the table. That's what it meant. So that's what the concept of collectivity was. Everybody had to do his part. Perfect synchronage. As hunters, they were specialized field. Even people that specialized in that type of the group hunting and different things like that, skills of what they wanted certain people to do within that hunt. Many different aspects of specialized fields within that circular encampment they were talking about. So that was part of our. So when you say, that's epistemological teachings that they had a very effective epistemology. With that, we had all these different fields of knowledge that people had, and they all were utilizing that in a very collective way. We have terms that still stem from that, like mamo kamato and mamo kamato, that means they're all together and in doing something in a very collective sense. That was some of the terminologies that they would use. And so that was that model of who they were. The other thing, of course, is within that you have the society within that circle encampment. You have such a thing as the type of society that it had to be. Well, us, it's a very family-oriented type of a society. In that long story, it had, and of course, we don't have that today because of either the boarding school era or something, and even a lot of our the older elders told me that they were way back when several years ago. They told me these older elders told me that they had a name for these younger elders. They called them. and there were those older elders I'm talking about are up in the 120 range. They surpass that. They, in our language, when you say surpass, they don't just barely pass it, but surpass 100 years old. Surpass in our language is a highway skak. A highway skak, that's how you would say it. The highway skak is you surpassed it by a long way. This age of 100 years old. So that's your, how those old people, when they talked to me that time, they were calling these younger elders. You know who they were calling younger elders at the time? The 80 and 90-year-olds. They're calling them. The old lady, the 123-old lady would say, "Oh, okay, okay, yeah, yeah." That's how she would call them. That's how she would say it. "Oh, okay, okay, yeah, yeah." These younger elders, 80 and 90-year-olds. I'll be lucky if I make it to 80. So that's the part of the old people teaching Tao. They are so effective in how I guess the older generation of elders had their way of how that very they talked about the family oriented nature of our culture. So when you say in our language, we say uh, father is Uyuktawi Mao, but they say Mama Uyuktawi Mao, and father of everything out there. Mama, all of everything. You say Mama, all together, everything. Mama Uyuktawi Mao, he is the father of everything around us. And Mama Wu, and then here's the thing. He creates himself, but he thinks for a long time, what am I going to create next? So what does he do? He creates himself, and that's the part that's different from the other side of the world. The other side of the world, or some of the nations up in the other side of the world, they believe that. To me, it sounds like God is a perpetual bachelor. He's a bachelor into eternity. That's how it sounds to me. So, but with our belief system, we say Mamo, he deliberately creates himself as a male, okay, as a sacred holy male. So, and then from there, he thinks for a long time, what am I going to create next? As he's creating himself, but even after he creates himself, he's still thinking about it for a long time. And before he now creates himself a partner, and that partner is female, and we call her like Mama Oyo Tawi. Mao is the father of everything together. We call her now Mama Oyo Tawi Mao, which is the mother of the whole universe. So we have, ladies and gentlemen, we actually have a father of the universe. We not only have a mother of the universe, but we also have a father of the universe. So that's how within our belief system. That's the kind of belief system that we come from. So it's a very family oriented type. So when we say Wiyuktawi Mao in our language, that is, for example, if if you said to your father, Nuktawi, you say that Nuktawi is my father. If you said that to him, what you're really saying to him is you're saying to him, my Tao, that when you break that Nuktawi into different parts, and that center part of that word, Nuktawi is Tao. See, Tao is what you're saying to your father. You're saying father and that, all right, but you're also saying the center of my universe. Mama Taoi Bao at the center of the whole universe. That's what you're saying, Tao. So you're calling him the center of my universe. So think of how great he feels, when you say that. And even if you say Nokta, it's not a shortened version of Nokta. It's a very, it's a sacred word. Nokta is not. It doesn't mean dad. You know, it means Nokta. We also it means uh, my my dear sacred Father and center of my earth. I mean, center of the universe is what you're saying. Nokta. So that's my dear Father. Is what you're saying. Center of my. That's that nukta. That's what it means. Neka, the same thing. It doesn't mean mom. You know, you're also suggesting that uh mama huyo kawi mao kawigi. That means the whole entire universe is her home. Is so that's of all the whole universe, my my mother of the whole universe is what you're saying, with her. So these are two very powerful names. And so that's what's taking place. And so what happens is you when you so we take it one step further, this father and mother of the universe, what happens is they unite. They physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally bond. When they bond, sakasketo. Sakasketo means they bond, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally bond. And then from there, they create a child of the universe. See, that's with us. That's how far back our old people know who we would term today as the Son of God. He was a boy. That's the teachings that we have within the older generation of that circle encampment elder what had actually the reality, the epistemology, or the reality within the nature of you know uh, the holy sacred I guess family, spiritual essence of family is that's that that the father, mother, and child of the universe. It's one family. So that's part of that. You know, this really, really powerful story that we have. So it's a sacred, very sacred thing for us to have family within our teaching because we have the family. He wanted to teach the rest of his universe of how holy and sacred the word Mak was the most highest word we have within our language. They call in our language when we say holy language, how we say holy Cree or high Cree or holy language is how we say it is Paskitoe Win, the language of Paskitoe Win, holy or high Cree, that kind of thing. The most highest holy Paskitoe Win that we have within our language is the word Mak. Biakohewa means the holy sacred concept of the word family. That's how sacred, that's how holy our word is when we say family within our language. Biakohewa. So when you break that word down, family, into its derivatives, biakohewa, biak is one, right? Ak over here at the end is more than one, like it's pluralized, but in the middle you have wam, right? It comes from a greater word meaning wigwam, an old Cree term that we stopped using. Wigwam means God's lodge, the Creator's lodge. That's what it means. That's the holiness of our home when we say family in our language. So our people were a very uh, ceremonial, sacred, oriented, holy, way of doing things, and that was one way of how we did our circle encampment was through the essence of family. How the example of that would be the chief that sits in the middle of this circle encampment. The circle encampment a long time ago, um, it was called Ute No. Ute No. Today, we would say later on when the white people came onto the shore, they would call them Muniaochenas. That means that little village that's beside the river. Muniaochenas would be the town, and they'll say Muniaoteno would be the the city. Now we call it a town and the city. Ute, now we call it the city. But the initial Ute now was before the white people came. Ute now was a circular encampment. What it means is Ute, that central encampment leader. He had a really beautiful heart. Ute, the same love he had for his own children, his own grandchildren. He would have an equal amount of love, everybody living equidistance from him. Utehe. And even there's a word for that. Yuhtekenachik. Yuhtekenachik means equal distance from him. Everybody's equidistance from him to his heart all the way around. Big one, that's how you say it in Cree. Equal distance from his heart. Big one, his heart. That's why they call it ute now, the heart. And that's the reason why too we say Xemanto. We don't just call him God. Xemanto is we call him compassionate, kind God. That's the reason why. It's because that's one of the holiest, the most sacred characteristics and attributes that a human being can ever possess on the face of this earth. The old people is the essence of kindness and compassion. Why that is, they said that the old people, they told us that it's compassion itself. That's how Creator came into existence because he had an absolute compassion for himself and he wanted to exist. So the sacredness of that, simultaneous to his creation of his mind, that's what we're talking about, his soul, which is that soft part that the child has, their head, and then your mind is situated just above. Old people they pointed at and that it's just above your eyebrows over here. That's where your mind, your physical mind is sit. You see over here. I don't know if you can see this hole in my head. But anyway, that's your mind, and then your soul is up here, and of course your body and your kindness. That's compassionate kindness. That's with us. That's what we call psychologists call it emotional learning or affective learning. It's emotions. With us is predominantly our emotions are predominantly made up of kindness and compassion. That's what we call emotional learning within our cultures. Ksewatsuin, they call it like Ksewatsuin, Ksemanto, see, the creator, compassionate, kind God. That's what he calls himself. So that's why we have such a family-oriented type of a society. We come from that level of society. No wonder everybody was in the same wavelength. But we had also a very strict kinship system, a very within the teaching, the etymological foundational teachings that we have of kinship. It has that epistemology of that type of a structure. What would we call it today? Science of genetics. What happened was the first human beings that were created, they lived an average lifespan of 400 years, they say. Why? Because they had a certain strict system of kinship, genetical structures, kinship system. They had that right to the T. And then, so in other words, like, let's see, the first man, it's not like the other side of the world where Adam and Eve, where their children married each other. Over here, they don't allow that. They call it incest over here. They don't allow that. What happened is our first couple, they're called CIC, no? Like Semantos, almost the same. CIC, no? Compassionate, kind uh, man. And CIC New School, compassionate, kind woman. When they were together and they had children, the first couple, they didn't marry each other. What happened was the sky beings, chief sky being, and his family of sky beings, they intermarried. That's the reason why we say awa sis in our language when we say child, awa sis, The word we have for child in our language is oasis. But when you break that word oasis for child into its derivatives, oh, the first part of that name for oasis is a wikoso wind. That's where it comes from. That means the gift that was loaned to you in the most holy, sacred way. That's what it means. And the second part of that, or the last part of that, sis, that oasis, the last part of that word would be sis. The child is a little sky being, Obeesibosis. So that's that last part of oasis comes from Obeesibosis. Little sky, the child is a little sky being. So they raise him like little sky beings. So that's how come we have a teaching of how we raise children. And that teaching, it takes from and that's part of the long story. It takes from the time the sun comes up, they measured it, the time the sun comes up in the month of May, all the way to that, it's a long day, all the way to the time the sun is at its fastest setting point. Tagipiasit, they call it. Now you can almost see it going down, but it hasn't yet touched the ground. Tagipiasit. That's how long it takes to recite that from sunrise to fastest setting point of that long day in the month of May. And that's an excerpt of the long story, and all it talks about is one thing. How does a father and a mother raise their daughter and their son? Right from conception all the way, only the growing years of that child, all the way to when the child, his or her child, reaches the state of maturity or adulthood. That's all they talk about is just the growing years of the child. Within that excerpt of the long story they call. But what they did with that long story is because why they had to make uh, do a certain thing to it was because of the what do you call because the memory bank itself. I don't know how many different generations within that their lifespan of the first couple and the succeeding generations, they knew that the mind, the mental capacity was going to be eroded by, the, I guess you could say, the process of decomposition or erosion, the spirit of, why something rusts out and gets old and dies, right? They knew that the memory bank was going to be eroded. So in order for them to keep that in its word for word form by the creator as a creator prescribed to them how to raise his children. He said, I'm going to lend you these children. I'm not giving these children. I mean, you can call them my own and all that, but they're really mine. So that way of how they recited that was the creator's teachings of how he bestowed the first couple. And I merely want you to only nurture those four stages of physical, mental, spiritual, emotional quadrant in absolute balance simultaneously as parents. Tipahuan, they call that, the simultaneous nurturance uh, of those four quadrants, and that's how they were to raise those children. And so, in order for them to remember how to, because of their memory bank was going to erode, what they had to do was they had to turn it into ceremonials. One of that ceremony for that was called the talking lodge. Bixwilgam. And when they did it was in the all day in the month of May, like I said, the long day from the sun up to fastest setting point of the sun. That's how long it took to recite the Creator's teachings of how He wants those children. Only the from earliest form of conception to the fullest maturity of that child, adult into adulthood, their son or their daughter. So that's what they talked about during the entirety of the whole day. They they eventually divvied it up that whole teepee. They sat in four cardinal directions. These four elders inside the teepee, and each one of those elders divvied up that whole day in the month of May into four equal parts that day, so that they would recite the four different stages of only the growing years of the child. What are those four stages of the growing years of the child? They even had names for it. One of them was Pigikatay Pigitatay and Bigskun, which is the initial conception to age 7. The belief is that the child is still holy, they're pure, they're innocent, they don't have like what we would term as sin. With us, we don't call it sin. We call it pastahawin. That means stepping over pastahawan win. That means you're stepping over the parameters of natural creator's dictates of natural the creator's natural law. You're stepping over them. If pastahaman. So pastahaman win is law. So that's what that means. So that's the kind of things that the old people they talked about in this long story. Yeah? So that's why we say everybody was in the same line. There's different sayings that trickled from that that circular encampment. Ute, no? Circular encampment. So we some of them call it. There's different words or sayings that slogans and beyond that derived from that in the raising of kids, because everybody was in the same wavelength with that teachings and story. And one of the slogans is it takes a whole community to raise a child. That's where that came from that circular encampment. Why? Because everybody was in the same wavelength. There was no individual that didn't know how to raise children, didn't know how to love children, didn't know how to be kind and compassionate to their child. Everything. The kindness, the love, they swarmed them with this because this is a little sky being they're raising. They're not, it's to them, this person from conception to age 7 was a little sky being. So when if they did a good job of raising them up to 7 as a father and a mother, as they're alone, this child, and that they would call uh, their boy or their daughter or their son, if they raised them properly up to the way the old people prescribed it or the way the creator prescribed it to them up to age 7, that child would have that sky being mentality, sometimes age 8, some of them 9, 10, or even up to 12 years. Some of them had that sky being mentality until they were 12 years old. Whoa. That means they raised them up really incredibly intelligent, really. Why? Kindness and compassion. They swarmed that child with kindness and compassion. Always painstaking love, care from every angle. This child, they tried to, have that type of kindness with and compassion for that child. So that's part of the teachings the elders have. The old people had in that circular encampment. Why was our circular encampment so important? Why did we have to have certain things within that circle encampment? Was because of that, because we have to, the first and foremost is our children. Absolute total focus was on the little sky being. That's what they are. Some old ladies, I still sometimes hear them say that. Is "Oh, that's how they say it. I mean, these little children are little sky beings. That's what they say about little kids. But many parents today, young parents, they don't know that. They don't understand that concept. They can't, but it's very, very a delicate thing. Like earliest form of conception, they tell us the old people, the earliest form of conception, they call that old people inside the uspayo. They call this uspayo is the womb itself. The uspayo stage is the very earliest form of conception, and all of them, as the child is growing in its different stages inside the womb, they have the term I in there, that attachment I in there. Like, and you know why that is? Because I derives from the word "aisino." That means they're already human. Even that earliest form, that earliest state. And the Creator, when He told them, and He equipped them with the word, He said, I merely want you to nurture those 4 quadrants: physical, mental, spiritual, emotional quadrants of the stages. That's why we call them Newiyawi, the four bodies people. That's it. So that's part of the fullness of our traditional belief system too. And the other thing too is we're one of the sun, we're one of the earth, we're one of the wind, and we're there is four. We're the Thunderbird. So we're one of, we're all embody those four elements in the universe. We're made of that, and they're deities. They're living beings that came together and created who we were. Through the Creator, of course, he brought them together and created who we were through those four divine supernatural beings that they were. So those four quadrants that the old people talk about is those, physical, mental, spiritual, emotional quadrant. It's simultaneous nurturance. I merely want you to nurture those four stages of that child that I'm going to lend you. I'm not giving you this child, I'm lending you this child. And it's like the old people say, if you do the job right, if you do the way he prescribed it to me, like it takes a whole day to recite that in the month of May. If you just can do that, if you can, the whole day in the month of May you can recite that. Old people say that's your ticket. Yeah, they say that they call it everlasting life. A person passes here. It's like an eagle plume. You lift off by itself and into the sky. You know. But if you put one or two drops of water or something onto it, and it might lift up for a little while, but the evil plume will come back and fall to the ground. If old people had a word for that, "Iutamihkut," they can't fly up. There's something pulling them, drawn back here. On the spirit or different, they have different names for that. You know how the old people have that. You know how they talk about these. So that's what the old people have told us, in regards to, the maintenance of our traditional epistemology. We wanted our systems of that in the maintenance of that type of a closeness bonding is the epitome of human development, as they call it. What is the essence of the epitome of human development is that. You tell us on if you follow meticulously that full day teaching. Now, a long time ago, um, because they were so devout to that system, they would have what you would term a 4-year non-physical contact courtship. When the two people met, they would have this courtship. So what happened is remember these divine beings from the universe came to marry with the first family, and then we have the different directions from the universe, even the layers of the four layers upon the sky over there, the four earth layers. The divine supernatural beings came over to intermarry with the first in the succeeding generations of the first couple's children, and they call that the clan system. In our language, we call it Uktatapeg Sinuin. That's what we Uktatapeg Sinuin means. Uktatapeg, that means Pimapegamon means that it's the lineage of the umbilical cord from generation to generation. Mitsea P, that's why they call it P, some P. Big Amok is coming from their generation to generation. It's a line, it's a lineage from generation. So that's what we call the clan system in our language. So it's a specific clan system of how they took care of that. So that, let's see, a couple that were courting, if they're going to court with each other, this couple would ask each other, what is your matrilineal and patrilineal clans on both sides? You would ask each other that. And so what they would do is, their parents, there's, the two parents they have on for each one of them there. So that's one level. And then their grandparents, That's the second level. That's your grandparent. And the third level is their great grandparents over here. And then the fourth level over here is their great great grandparents. Uh, so how you would express that would be their parents over here. So their parents, these two, their parents, and then they have over here the next level, that's their grandparents, and then those would double again. Okay, so over here you would have their parents, and then there's four now over here, their grandparents. So they're double. And then over here you have eight. And that's their utan skuta panuawa, they call them. Some of them they say Chapanua. That's where the word Chapan comes from, Chapanua. And then, but that fourth level up there, their second, their great grandparent, Utayanis Utapanua. That's how they would say it. Dance Skutapanua was that the first level of great grandparent Utayan Skutapuan is the next and succeeding level of great grandparent. So that fourth level, when you say great grandparent, up to that level, they would ask each other, they would have to not have the same clan. Because we have plant and animal and sky being clans too. Remember, we have came from chief sky being clan and all these different sky beings from different parts of the universe. They have names for those clans. So these two that are trying to court, they ask each other, where does your clan come from? And if we came from any one of those clans, so you got what? Over here, you have your grandparents. So that's four. Great grandparents, you have eight. Great great grandparents, you have 16. And you have, okay, let's have parents is two over here, and you have two parents, and then four, your grandparent, and then eight is your great grandparent, and 16 is your great great grandparent, and up to I guess they used to go up to even the 32nd level, your great great grandparents. That's that 32 levels there. So any one of those 32 levels on both sides of them, prospective husband or wife, if any one of them were the same, they were like brother and sister. They wouldn't court. That's how strict adherence they had a long time ago of relationships, how to not try to break. Why? One of the reasons why was longevity in life. The average lifespan back in the day when that first started out with the first couple was 400 years. Why? They took care of that science of genetics, their genetic structure, the genetic makeup. They wouldn't be born deformed like we have children today. They have different defects like that. Because of that, the intermarriage of that bloodline, those four levels that I was talking about, that's the part of that we do today, and we disrupt that. The power that it was broken from the time of contact. They broke us up because they didn't want us to have our culture the way the old people had set our culture to be the strict systems of how we lived a long time. So the average lifespan back in them days in the earliest form was 400 years old. In fact, there was three major cataclysms that took place. We hail back from, we're not what do you call immigrants. We didn't come from the other side of the world. We have a sacred sanctuary our old people talk about just north of Maple Creek. Sacred sanctuary where the first human beings were created, according to our long story of teaching them. A long story that we have that sacred sanctuary. They know that they have a name for that holy Uktapuin. They call that one place. It's a sacred sanctuary. So that's part of the teachings they have. So we hail back prior to the volcanic era. Homo sapiens, that human beings, they hail back prior to the volcanic era. Some of the tribes they share some of that the stories with us, like the Hopis, I believe the Navajos, and the Six Nations of Eastern Canada, Onondaga, Tuscarora, United Seneca, Tioga, and Mohawk nations together. They share that same story that we have of how some of the how we survived that volcanic era, how we came through it. You know, how did we survive the Great Flood? How did we come through? How did we survive this last major big ice age? How did we come through that? We have stories about that. So the initial ones lived prior to the volcanic era. We lived for 400 years. But you know something? Because people were so devout to the creator system of how you raise kids and everything, that little sky beings and everything that talking Lao was talking about, every single detail, they were so devout in that. After that, this last major era renovation, this big ice age, the third one, the fourth one is coming up, they say, but after this major third one, they say they were so devout to that system, these old people, instead of for living for 400 years, this was just not too long ago, the Mississippian era, they lived for 800 years. So that's the devoutness of the sacred story. They followed that history of creation story. The creator himself, he told that first couple. He said, "My word is so powerful, just orally, just through my story itself. I'm going to renovate this earth 4 times. It's going to make it all the way to that fourth renovation. My word is that powerful." That's what he said. We have a word for that. That the peak scroll, that's my word, but the Skamagan means it'll make it all the way to the fourth rene. And he gave him a choice. I give you a choice. My children, he told them, a couple. He said, when that time comes, that fourth renovation, there can be a lot of you that know my story at that time, or freedom of choice. He said, you can be just a few of you that know my story too. He said, why? Because I call myself compassionate, kind God. That's why. He said, so freedom of choice. That's what he told them. You want to be a lot of you or just a few of you? The choice is yours. That's what he told them. So that's part of the teachings of old people. They had those intergenerational periods, those older elders, older generation of elders, the intergenerational curious of that long story of of why there's certain belief systems that we have that maintained us as a people, as a one, one with the earth kind of a people. Why were we? How did we live absolute one with the earth? There is an epistemology within that of why we did things. It's one of them is the long life that they talk about. We eat the pure foods. What do they call them today? Back in the day, they call it in tua chike win. In tua chike win is the pure foods that we eat. In tua chike. And what did they call it today? Organic foods. That's what they would call it today. And the purity of these animals that time too, because they ate these organic foods. What did they eat today? Pesticides, and all kinds of stuff they spray the fields with, and these animals eat that, and we eat that. That's all. No wonder we live a shorter lifespan, other than the 400 and that 800 year that normalized lifespan that they had because of just certain things like the science of genetics, the kind of food they eat, the kind of exercise they had, that kind of thing. There was no such a thing as a 48-hour, 52-hour labor pains a long time ago because they were raised in balance. Women had what I guess they call umoisono. Wow. Umoisono is like their sixth sense. They knew when the dilations existed, when their water was going to break, and all of these different things that they had. One of our great grannies, old lady Susan, way back, I don't know how many generations back, they were traveling, and the navigator, he said, our cultural and traditional navigator, he said, "There's a storm coming from this side, but we go over this way, that storm will miss and we'll get away from that storm, but the storm will hit part of us while we're traveling, but we'll get there and it'll won't be as means that snow won't be as great in that area. So while they were traveling, this woman, one of our great grannies, she just told everybody, the whole caravan, that's how good they were. That's how adept they were with those teaching. And she said, "Nia, now go on. I'll catch up with you anyway. I'm going to have a traditional ceremonial ritual of childbirth." That's what she said, and she went through that ritual before in a back robe over there. That's what she had, and she had these layered of layers of hide layer moss, soft hide moss, soft hide of a back traditional birthing pack. And that first pack, first layer over here, there's strings over here, four in the back layer of buffalo robe. Under the snow, she had this delivery, and the first layer was like wiping layers, the birth layer, the wiping layer. There's even a placenta layer, a pre-cut, they call that placenta layer of how they tied it into airlock and put it up in a tripod kind of a scaffolding idea, so it decomposes by itself in a very natural course of decomposition kind of thing. All of these different techniques that she had, and even in the art of where do you cut that, how long do you cut that umbilical cord from that second knuckle over here, and you squeeze out that milk and you tie it up over here, and what do you have to wait till it after it drops that, and you have an umbilical cord. So all of these different things, how they raise the children, all these people, that these young couples that were courtship, that would be their prenatal. Long time ago. Today, what do they do? They wait till the child, till the woman is pregnant, and they call them prenatal classes. Long time ago, the prenatal classes were the time when they were on their four-year non-physical contact courtship. They were having prenatal classes. How do you raise those children that you're going to have? What are those things? Fine line detail. Minimal fast, 2 days. Why? They don't want no food, no water, 2 days, 2 nights. They don't want to have to get up and go to the bathroom when the elders talking about, because they don't want to miss an important part of how you raise that child during that full day in the month of May ceremony. Remember? Talking loud. So, but anyway, that's just a little bit of what they call epistemology in our culture. Some of the hardcore, the real things, and who the development of the richness and fullness of what you call a human being, to the level you develop that child to be in what they call the level of eternal learning, where they'll have that type of character developed within them, where they're now ready to learn into what they call eternity, eternal learning. So with that as